Hi everyone, my name is Sean Duplessis from Spinnaker Support. Thank you for joining the webinar. I hope that you find this very useful and that maybe it takes it to the next step with conversations with Spinnaker and about your SAP strategy. I know that this is a really crazy time with COVID and everyone is experiencing a really difficult time in business today and working in the workplace and what's going on. But as you know, everyone knows that SAP announced the move of the maintenance end date from 2025 to 2027. So what I'd like to do as part of this presentation is really talk about what does that mean? What is SAP strategy? How does that apply to you? And then sort of give you some good insights about what are some possibilities that you have and how you can leverage those, and then how Spinnaker can actually help facilitate or participate in that to give you a really good solution that actually is going to align with your business. So again, my name's Sean Duplessis. I've been in the third-party support space for well over 12 years, in the SAP space well over 30 years. And I'm definitely, pretty experienced in the areas of third-party support, but also just in general in terms of SAP overall. So as you can see, this is a report that comes out from the website and from the web, and you can go and see there's many of them out there. But I think this is important. Things have changed. The global IT environment, the budgets, everything around OPEX and CAPEX, I'm pretty sure that every company is sitting now and having discussions about how can they reduce their cost and how can they reduce their capital projects and make sure that they can preserve the cash flow for the things that's important to the business. So not an uncommon scene, a story this. Everyone is familiar with it. I know that Gartner does some pretty good presentations about what this means to you as a company, but if you go to the web, you can see it's everywhere on the web today. So what's important about this 2025? I know that, or 2027, 2025, I know that customers have this on their mind and they're paying attention to it. And I know that SAP is using this as a way to pressure customers to take the next step. In other words, looking at the on-premise software and looking at what their plans are going to be to move from on-premise ECC to S4 and then future into the cloud. So the most important thing I want to say about this, even though SAP is pressuring you to make that move, know that that is not in SAP's control. The ability for you to make a choice is your ability, and it should align with your business. As stated by CBR, and this was prior to the 2027, but I don't think the statement changes at all. The 2027 date is really a date for SAP. It's a date that they're trying to march at. It shouldn't be the date that applies to you as a customer. And you shouldn't panic about it because SAP has historically and continually will move these dates on the demand and how fast their customers are moving. So don't get frustrated, don't get concerned. Know that you just continue with doing the right thing for your businesses, and then know that this date will move along to support your needs. So just to summarize that slide, the most important thing, I don't think you have to be afraid. I think if you ask Gartner that, and if you look at it on the web and you look historically, you know that SAP will continue to move this date. Secondly, it's important not to allow SAP to drive your strategy and your spend and how you use your money. Let your business drive the strategy of what you need and when you need it. As your core ERP is up and running today, it's supporting your business, there is no need to make a migration into the future softwares unless that migration is going to increase your business in terms of reducing cost or increasing your business revenue. And just the last point on this, know that you have options. If you speak to SAP, they would say that you don't have options. If you speak to your SIs, they follow the SAP or the vendor strategy. They're going to say the same. But listen to what Gartner says and listen to what Spinnaker says. Know that you have alternatives that are going to get you a better solution, save you the money, and let you focus on business initiatives that's driving your business. So just to talk about the historical side of this, everyone's familiar with these slides. In actual fact, I've seen them for 20 years. And I know that in terms of the dates of maintenance end dates and in terms of products and the way SAP strategizes this, it's purely a marketing strategy. It essentially says, I want customers to move at one point, and I'm going to get some critical mass at one point, and then we'll make a migration. And the way I do it is I tell customers you're not going to get mainstream from maintenance. But we also know that SAP has historically always moved the dates, especially for ERP, ECC. The idea is, you know, if you look at back into the R3 days, you can see all of the timelines that have moved, and you're experiencing it right now with ECC6. My projections is that ECC6 will be, the maintenance will be extended right into 2035. I believe because it's about customers making that move, and the fact that customers cannot justify that move, that date will be prolonged. As stated here, I think this is very important. While extending the date, while SAP has extended the date to 2027, that may provide the illusion of addressing your concern, but in reality, it's done nothing but just delay the issue. The real issue that you're dealing with is, how do I fund this project? How do I justify the cost of it? And how do I justify the additional expense to make that move when I'm not getting any return for my business in terms of real value? Bill McDermott, I know he's no more the CEO, but the strategy still holds true today. SAP strategy is to move everything from on-premise into software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. And as you may see, SAP is already changing its license strategy to align with that. And the way they're going to go about this is SAP is going to push you to change your database. In other words, remove everything that says Oracle or any other database. Get onto SAP database like MaxDB, Sybase, and HANA with the strategy to get you onto HANA and the versions of SAP that support that, and then to move you to S4 on-premise, and then even asking you another step to move you from S4 on-premise to S4 as software as a service. So through that cycle, you're basically making 3 upgrades that's costing you in terms of your implementation, your team, your structures, your project costs and all that, and at the same time, your licensing is going up at the same time. I think this is important. If you follow SAP's annual announcements in terms of, you know, well, how well SAP's done, this report that I used was in November of 2019. But essentially, if you look at it, SAP is a $26 billion company today from a revenue perspective. They have forecasted they'll be at 34 billion within the next 2 to 3 years. What that means is essentially they believe they have the customer base. They have 44,000 SAP customers, and they believe the transformation of those customers onto their strategy is going to increase the revenues for them. Of course, databases in there in terms of HANA database, but the reality is what you pay for your on-premise software and what you will pay into the future is going to be more expensive. Year on year, it's going to increase about 15%. In total, if you look at it between now and the next 3 years, you're going to be paying at least 30% more than what you pay today. The real issue here is expect that SAP wants to get more money from you as you are their customers. And the important thing about this, know that you're not the only customer that has concerns about it. All customers have concerns, and you can see this in terms of the adoption rate and the migration rate. The data shows that customers are not moving at the speed that SAP is, and for 2 reasons only. One is the project cost of implementation and the move cost is expensive, and then secondly, once they land there, they will be paying more than what they have today. The end game is software as a service, as I mentioned earlier, and you know that's what Bill McDermott said as well. But it's not just software; it's hardware, it's platforms. Everything is going to be built in that. SAP and all these large vendors love the model that Workday adopts and what Salesforce adopts, and they really believe they want to get out of the business of on-premise software and they want to get into that. So that's absolutely, they've stated it. It's clear that that's a strategy. End of maintenance announcements 2027 is really just a way that SAP is getting you to go there. That's the path that they're moving you along. And that's the pressure point. The second one is, you know, SAP is obviously, you know, in the process of trying to get the customers to lock them into the HANA database. And then obviously once they lock you into the HANA database, the next part of the step they're going to want to do is get you onto their HEC program. In other words, HANA Enterprise Cloud, but really all that is on infrastructure hosted in SAP infrastructure. And then ultimately they want to move you to HANA in the cloud, and then at the same time to S4 in the cloud. And all while we're doing this, SAP expects to collect at least 14% more from you every year. So this slide really, and there's many of these slides out on the internet, and this slide specifically from Gartner really shows you what is the adoption rate in terms of that. I think it's very important when you look at this slide, what you see is SAP states on this slide, and that's a pretty old one, but it says that there's 35,000 ERP customers. I don't know, in some places they say 40,000, but the reality is it's probably somewhere in that ballpark. Of those customers, what you see is in production today, and by the way, when we say in production today, we're talking about specific instances of product. It's not that the whole customer enterprise is in S4 HANA today. So the idea here is you have 6,700 installations that are in production today. Yes, there's a whole lot of projects out there, there's a whole lot of selling out there that's going on, but the reality is the way we look at this is how many people have actually implemented this and it's running their core business. And as you can see from this, in terms of this is a very small percentage in the overall adoption of customers moving into the new technologies. And again, it comes back to one thing. Customers are not moving at the same pace as SAP, and part of the reason is they haven't identified or able to identify the ROI and the project cost that can fund this based on real value. Why are customers not moving at the same pace or expected pace according to SAP? I think it's very important. The current enterprise software works just fine. As you look at your core product, which is ECC, which was R3 in the old days, that core product is doing your business today and it works fine. It's in terms of installing that, customers have made a significant investment. You know, from the old days before Y2K, it took a lot to build those systems. It was very expensive to do those systems, and customers have invested significant amount of time, resources to get that in place, and that is working fine. The reality is S4 is not going to work any better for you. So you're sitting back and saying, I've got the software, I'm paying what I know what I paid for today, I want to continue with that software. Secondly, customers have not been able to identify a real return on investment, and it's a challenge for every customer. I get asked this question many times, and the reality is it's a simple one. If you're going to spend more money, you have to ask yourself the question, where am I reducing cost or where am I increasing revenues? And if you cannot identify that, then the reality is there's no return on investment. High cost of re-implementation. This is an implementation. This is not purely an upgrade. The reality is you're moving from one code line to a completely separate code line, which is going to require data migration. It's going to require that you look at your customizations and you work through that and solve that before you make this choice. And then lastly, what you have today in terms of your on-premise software, S4 is not at a point now that SAP can come in and say, we'll replace your complete enterprise in terms of what you have as for on-premise with a new SAP solution. That is not possible, which means now you get yourself into a situation where you have a sort of hybrid solution and you're stuck with maintaining and managing two systems, two different processes to absorb that. So that's additional cost that you would be on the hook to cover. So here's the important thing about all of this. This is what we see on the market. This is how, you know, we interact with our customers. This is what we hear, and I know this is what Gartner hears as well. You have sort of customers sitting in three categories at this point. And the first one is the majority of the customers are sitting back and saying, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I don't know when I'm going to start the migration. I haven't even started the process of putting a plan together. I'm sort of getting by with what we have to do. And of course, with COVID right now, we know that any plans that you may have had is sort of put on hold until all of this solves itself. So customers are basically sitting there and saying, I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen here. And then at the same time, I'm waiting for someone to show me or demonstrate, or companies to demonstrate the value in a way that I can use that as a process to actually get this project funded and start to get the resources together and start the migration. So many of those customers have two choices. One is they're either stay on the SAP maintenance, they continue paying the 22%. even though they know they're not getting much for that because everything SAP is doing now is in the future, and what they have for on-premise is not getting any attention. So the reality is your 22% is going to SAP as net benefit or net profit. And the reality is you're not getting any benefit for it. So you as a customer, you know that. And so what you really would like to do is say, I would like to save the money while I think about this and while I get through this. And at one point, I would like to make a choice about where I'm going to go with that. And then once you do that, you understand that you'll have a project and there'll be a cost to go with it. So those customers look at whether they want to stay with SAP maintenance, and then you have a very large percentage of customers are saying, I'm looking for alternatives. Now, in other words, I'm asking SAP to give me a reduction or a savings. Or secondly, I'm looking at companies like Spinnaker that can actually do that. They can give me a discount, give me a high level performance, and that allows me to focus on business initiatives and not to be concentrated about being forced to upgrade in areas that is actually making no difference to my business. And then you have customers, and there's, as I've seen on the numbers, we have quite a few of them in terms of customers that are sort of dabbling in it. They're basically saying, yes, you know what, I go to SAP, they'll give me some licenses, and we'll start the process. I may sandbox it, I may do some proof of concept, or I may actually choose some products in terms of putting in S4 as an example, BW and solutions like that, or CRM. But in terms of ECC, which is the core product that runs the business, very few customers have gone down that path at this point. And so what will happen is they'll get to a point where the customer feels, they feel confident and they see it in the market and they see how SAP is expanded. They feel confident that they're ready to take the core business and make that migration. In terms of a simple TCO, what I did here is I basically said, if you look at a 6-year period and a customer that's paying about 1 million in annual maintenance fee, roughly around 900 professional licenses, and assume that SAP gives you 100% discount for on-premise S4. In other words, no licensing effect for S4. In other words, you get that for free and you can do that. If that's the case, I used this model and I said, well, if you look at what it takes from a customer's perspective, in other words, the idea of paying your maintenance, hardware support, self-support, in other words, the idea that you have to go search for issues on the service marketplace or in Solution Manager, you have to sort of validate that and make sure that it works for your system. And in the cases where you truly have an issue, SAP is going to tell you, well, the future software or the upgraded software is what solves that, and they're not actually going to provide a solution for that. The other area is customization support. In other words, custom code. That is something you're addressing now today, and I know as resources are getting older and the workforce is maturing, and a lot of the people are choosing to get into the new technologies from a skill and expertise perspective, you're now battling. You don't only have a cost issue, you also have a risk issue. And then, of course, implementations. The biggest one in this area for all customers with on-premise software today is the vendors like SAP and Oracle are forcing you to migrate. They're forcing you to upgrade, and they will continue to do that. And that is absorbing from your project cost. It's actually taking a lot of money and resources in your organization and it's diverting you from doing what you need to do to increase business value and essentially focusing on just making those upgrades to support the vendor strategy. So important behind this, if you stay on status quo just using that model, you're going to be roughly around 12 million. If you took it and you said, how much am I going to pay over 6 years and what's all those costs in those different areas? It'll be around it's going to be around 12 million that you'll be end up paying. If you decide to go down the migration and go through the process of the implementation, there's a lot of information available these days that actually show you what customers are seeing in terms of, once they go down and they charter the project and they reach out to the SIs and they start going through the SAP licensing and the hardware impacts of HANA and everything that they have to go through there, they're seeing between 2 to 4 times the spend of what they currently spend. So that is a big jump. In actual fact, I've heard from many prospects and customers that one of the reasons they chose third-party support is they got to a point that they went through that strategy and they couldn't make that move because they couldn't justify the cost. And once they seen the real cost behind it, it was frightening for them as an organization to make that move. And therefore, the only alternative is not to stay on SAP maintenance, because that's just going to prolong the cost and the pain. They essentially come to third-party support. And what we do in this case, we take all of that out of the picture. We do your customization support. We remove the concept of self-support. We're not changing your infrastructure. There's no forced upgrades. And at the end of the day, we save you significantly on your maintenance, at least 62% just of what you pay SAP. This is a highly viable option. It's really a massive cost saving, and the support that you get is far superior to what you're currently getting under your maintenance agreement. So here's my recommendation, and I use this as a talking point for many customers as they go through a discussion or a negotiation with SAP. I always sort of set the stage and say, one is, your current on-premise software is installed and implemented today. It may not be in its complete entirety. In other words, you may have not leveraged all the functionality. You may have not expanded it. You may not have consolidated systems. The important thing is, even if you're going to choose to go to S4, you're going to have to go through that strategy. So as you take your time now and you think about, what should I be spending? Where am I spending my money on? This is a really good option for you to say, let me invest in my current situation. It's going to save me some issues. In other words, it could reduce costs or increase revenues in terms of that. And then it'll also prepare me for whatever choice I make to in the future. So leverage that. Secondly, wait for SAP to prove the business value. Ask SAP in terms of your current model, how much you pay, in terms of what it costs you to run, and what it's giving you from a revenue perspective. How can this new solution change that? In other words, what is it going to do to change that? In other words, if I look at the bottom lines, I want to look at all the numbers, and I want to be able to see that there is a point in time where the return on investment will actually be in my favor. Get your support at a discount. I always recommend this. If you don't see value, I think you're entitled to ask for it. You're entitled to ask the SAP the question, what are you going to do for me? I don't see the value, and I'm not planning to make the move. I feel that I need to be paying for the value, and I don't feel that. So ask them for the discount. Negotiate with them. I always tell customers too, at the end of the day, is, you know, your maintenance renewal is on an auto renewal type policy. You know, you've got till the end of September. It automatically renews from the 1st of December, January. Get out of that strategy. Turn it back on SAP and get into a negotiation for every year's maintenance. Let them fight for your business. Don't make it just an administration process that works very well for SAP. And then lastly, even if you choose to do that, then you'll, from a support perspective, you're not going to get more support than you currently get. You're not going to get any better support. The reality is, what Spinnaker can provide is we can save that money for you and save that cost. You can use it where you need to. And at the same time, we will take care of your system, and you will not have to be concerned about resources. You're not going to have to be concerned about the custom code. You're not going to have to be structuring your team around all the implementations. It's going to be a much better cost at a much better business solution. Takeaways, at least from a starting point, there's no rush. You shouldn't feel rushed. And I know a lot of customers feel this pain, and I hear it from CIOs and IT folks. They're under pressure to do this. There is no rush. And if you need to, you can validate that in the market, and Gartner will give you the same insights in terms of that. Customer migration to HANA. Do not let SAP lock you in from an infrastructure and a technology that's going to limit your abilities in the future, and it's going to cost you more. Lastly, the migration is going to cost 2 to 4 more times in terms of overall cost. And then know that it's not a complete solution. In other words, you're going to have to find alternatives to solve that. And lastly, customers have a choice. You have a choice. What does Spinnaker do? We are the smart choice, absolutely. We have been in the space for well over 12 years in terms of doing third-party support. We're a highly matured company in this. We offer a quality model that's built around giving you the highest level of service with the highest level of expertise. We are a 24/7, 365 coverage. In other words, we're right across the globe. Your system is always covered. There's no question about people leaving at 5 o'clock when they finish their work. The reality is we cover all of that. We have over 1,186 plus customers and growing pretty fast with a 98.6% satisfaction. The idea that customers that come to us, they come to save money, but what they really stay for is the quality of service and the customer satisfaction that they get from us. And then again, we're in 104 countries today in terms of operations that we support, over 104 countries today with 14 different languages that we're supporting. What is it, our services? You know, our services are, what's the core part of our services? Our core part of our services is around software support. The idea of keeping your system running, keeping all your custom code up and running, keeping all your business processes running, making sure that we do it 24/7, 15-minute SLAs on the P1s, and essentially that you always know that we have you covered in terms of that. The ability to leverage our teams and integrate our teams so we look as one, so we're part of your team, and that you can leverage our skills and expertise as you consider other things and as you have challenges from a project and a business strategy. Global tax and regulatory, third-party support does not exist if you don't provide global tax and regs. The ability to make sure your system is compliant at all times. Spinnaker has made the investment in terms of the organization and the ability to do it, and we have the proven track record. Security and vulnerability, you know, in terms of what you get from SAP is really reactive. What you get from Spinnaker is proactive. In other words, we're monitoring it in a way that's actually going to take care of the issue before you see it, and you're not going to have to wait for SAP to find or recognize an issue and solve that. Spinnaker is ahead of that curve. And then last, technology advisory service. We focus on what SAP Strategy and SAP products and how it applies to customers, and we provide recommendations into their roadmap and their strategy. As they consider digital transformation, mobility, or any technologies, even moving to HANA and S4, we help them think through that. The services around managed services, this is a business that inherently is built into our business by the nature of customers saying, well, you do such a great job here and you're taking care of my most complex high risk area. Can you take this? And so what we do offer there is, of course, monitoring advice for basis and system monitoring, the ability to take over the maintenance of that. It's a natural fit for what we do. In other words, focusing on fixing your most critical system, but also making sure that it's always up and running. And important, yeah, we save our customers at least 62% of their spend on maintenance today. We have responses within 4 to 5 minutes, and we have complete or comprehensive coverage of your enterprise on-premise software. So again, I want to say thank you very much for joining this call or this webinar, and I appreciate that you're all here, and I hope that you found this valuable. And I know that as you go through this, and if you're new to this, you probably have some questions. What I do recommend is you have my information. Reach out to me. Let's take it to the next discussion. I'm pretty sure that Spinnaker will give you the insights, help you through the information, and answer all the questions that you may need to be able to make a decision and understand your options. Again, thank you everyone for joining.